and welcome back to Hook in Comics, a show where an ABKS, that is, American-born Korean speaker, provides English language reviews of Korean language webtoons and comics. And today, the webtoon I'm going to be reviewing for you is titled Yakhan영웅, which literally translates to Weak Hero, and that is also the name that the English version of the webtoon goes by. It is published by Naver in South Korea, as well as the English version of the Naver webtoon app in the US. There have been 267 chapters published, and the current status of the webtoon is now completed. It completed publication in November of 2023 in South Korea, and the English version finished translation within the same month. I also, as a reader, have completed this webtoon. I started following this webtoon weekly during the latter half of its publication, and I finished it in November 2023. According to Naver, this webtoon is classified under the genres of action, hagwonmur, which means like high school lifestyle, and himsumjin, which I don't know the exact translation or origin of this term, but if I would break it into parts, we have himsum, which means hiding one's strength, and jin means like the real deal. And so my guess is that himsumjin as a genre means it's referring to a character who is like the real deal, but their strength is hidden underneath their demeanor. This webtoon centers around high school student Yan Shi-eun, who appears weak and feeble. However, contrary to his weak appearance, Yan Shi-eun has an innate skill for dirty fighting, which is basically using whatever resources you have at hand to overcome an opponent that you wouldn't be able to defeat by strength alone. So from day one of school, he stands up to the bullies attempting to subdue him using his dirty fighting skills. And he makes a name for himself as a cunning and ruthless opponent, which in turn invites more bullies to want to come challenge him and establish their dominance in the school. As the battles increase and his renown gets spread not just across his school, but across their entire local region, he attracts adversaries from a cross-school alliance of teenage gangsters, progressively bringing the infighting to an even greater scale. And one particularly fun fact about this webtoon is that it's currently being developed into a multi-season web drama. The first season premiered in, I think, 2023 and was just added to Netflix last month. And they just announced that season 2 will be released on Netflix very soon. I think the release date is April 25th. And so we have season 1, which is actually based on a short 12-chapter arc of backstory that happens between chapters 26 through 37 of this webtoon. And it's about the male lead while he's in his previous school and all of the things that basically made him into the guy you see on chapter 1 of this webtoon, whereas season 2 will basically cover the actual main storyline of this webtoon that starts from chapter 1 and goes all the way through the next nearly 300 chapters. And so now I'm going to go into my review of this webtoon. I'm going to break my review into 3 categories. I'm going to talk about the characters, I'm going to talk about the storyline, and then I'm going to talk about the artwork. And so beginning with the characters, I would rank this webtoon as a 4 out of 5 stars. One thing I love about this webtoon is that our main character, Yan Shi-eun, is super OP. He is so overpowered for the most part throughout the entire series. Like, if you did not know the plot going into it and you just read chapter 1 of this webtoon, you would be completely mind blown halfway through because you do not expect what you're about to see coming out of him. Like, this guy is so ruthless for someone who is so young and unassuming. I mean, he looks like the perfect mobam-sang. He is like a model student. And so from the first interaction he has with his classmates, you're not expecting the level of savageness you're going to get. And we also get a lot of great character development in our male lead. There are arcs when you really see him overcoming trauma from his previous school altercations. There's even a longer arc in which you get to see him grow into his love and passion for combat and the art of fighting, which is unexpected but a nice angle to take with this character. And one other great thing they did for the characters is that they created a very worthy opponent as the main adversary for Yan Shi-eun. He is like the foil of his character. They're both technically like boy geniuses. They're both practically unstoppable in the fighting realm. And so you have this great juxtaposition to see what it would be like to have someone who is this smart and clever and skilled, but they're surrounded by loving family and friends. But then on the other hand, you have someone else who has the same level of smarts and cunning and skills, but they are basically a lone wolf and did not grow up with that strong support structure around them, and how those environments fed what their strengths turned into. In terms of our secondary characters, let me tell you, we have a lot of them. In fact, in my personal opinion, I think we have way too many characters in this webtoon. So much so that even when they try to throw in really unique character traits, I sometimes can't tell people apart or remember who they are. Like, I feel like if you have to have multiple characters having purple hair, that's when you know that you've overcomplicated things. While having a lot of characters means there's a lot to love, and there are a lot of characters that I really love. But honestly, it sometimes feels like information overload, and there are so many scenes and so many different people who have so many different backstories that it's hard to juggle. And if you're coming from the drama background of the storyline rather than the webtoon background, there are some differences that I will point out. Like I said, the first season of this drama focuses mainly on a really small 12-episode arc that tells the backstory of Yanxian before he gets into his current school and meets all of the current supporting characters. And so for the 3 key characters that are in this arc, I will say that they were portrayed very well in the drama. They were portrayed just as compellingly as they were in the webtoon, so I think they did a good job of really capturing, if not even enhancing, the relatableness of those 3 characters. But on the flip side, I will say that there's one key characteristic of our male lead, Yanxian, that the drama did that is very different from how he was characterized in the webtoon, which is that he was not a violent person to begin with. He became a fighter because of the situation that occurred at the climax of season 1 of this drama. And so whereas in the drama, I think they have him fighting people as early as season 1, episode 1, in the real backstory that is this webtoon, he was actually just your stereotypical model student. The big fight that happens in the climax of season 1 of the drama is actually in the webtoon the very, very first time that Yanxian ever gets into a fight. Next off, let's talk about some storytelling. I'm going to give this webtoon a 3.75. Now, I would say that if I made this review while it was still publishing and before the very last arc of this webtoon happened, I probably would have given it like 4.5. I really, really love most of the story of this webtoon up until the last arc. I'll go into the why for that a little later. But as I said, this webtoon is classified as hagwonmul and action, which means it is very male-oriented. It takes place in a high school, and there is lots of fighting. I believe the characters go to an all-boys school, and so there are almost 0 female characters. So this was really, really meant to be made for a young male audience to relate to. I think the author did a really great job of being really creative with the fight scenes. You never know what Yanxian is going to grab out of his pocket, quite literally, and hit them with next. Because these fights are so scrappy and our main character is so creative in his way of fighting, you end up with a lot of really, really original fight sequences that have you at the edge of your seat. Not to mention, this is the perfect underdog story because Yanxian is the most unsuspecting fighter that you will meet. And so every time that he wins a fight and quite literally goes up and up in the rankings, you just get so proud as a reader, especially when you see him getting so much recognition and infamy. I mean, the news spread so quickly that even without knowing what he looks like or even his real name, people will shudder just when hearing the title given to him, which is the Injang Peksa, which literally translates to the White Death of Injang. And what adds to the fun of the story is that they have this very fun, stats concept of, rankings of all the male high school fighters within their region. And so every time a battle ensues and, you see the rankings of 2 characters switch, or you see Yanxian or really any of our characters just shoot up in their rankings after a really good takedown, it's very exciting. It's like you're playing a video game and you're seeing your stats being updated in real time. Now going back to the one major flaw in the storytelling for this webtoon, which is that the ending battle really sours the whole story. It's like nothing you wanted to see. The tides are all turned in all the ways that you don't want to happen. The opposing side uses a lot of cheap tricks to keep Yanxian out of the fight in the beginning that is so unnecessary. There are a lot of small losses that are really heartbreaking to see, and then even after the battle, the way that the whole webtoon as a whole is wrapped up afterwards is the most unsatisfying way to end the conflict between Yanxian and his main adversary. And I think I, along with most of the readers who read this webtoon, agree that this is not the way we wanted the story to pan out. And another thing about the plot that I will pick at is that there's a very involved, complex storyline involving this high school student gang alliance and their business dealings with adults. And it's trying to portray them as this organized crime syndicate of high schoolers that is earning its spot amongst the adult big leagues. But it is too detailed, too complex, and in my opinion, a little too boring, and doesn't really do anything to aid the plot. So personal opinion, I think that whole entire plot line could have just been left out and it wouldn't have hurt the plot in any ways. Going back to the drama adaptation of this webtoon, I know only season 1 is out so far, but I want to note that like I said, this arc was only 12 chapters, and so it was very short and not action-packed because Yuan wasn't a fighter for most of it. And so the creators of this drama actually borrowed scenes from some future fights that were supposed to happen at Yuan new school in order to like satisfy the bloodlust of the avid fans of the webtoons, which is great because I, as a fan of the webtoon, knowing that arc and knowing that there's almost no fighting in it, I wasn't sure how I would like season 1 because the fighting is the most enticing part of this webtoon. So I really liked how they were able to pull out some of those most juiciest fight scenes from the webtoon and enter them in so early into the drama. But at the same time, one thing I'm sad about in the drama adaptation is because like some of the fight scenes were translated to the season 1 arc, there are going to be several plot points as well as some fan favorite characters who will probably not appear in season 2, or they will have their plot lines morphed into another character, which is also understandable because like I said, there are too many characters in this story. So morphing a couple characters into one is probably better for the storytelling overall. The last point I want to talk about is the artwork. For the artwork, I'm going to give it a 3 out of 5 stars. I think the aesthetics of the characters are like average. There are a lot of rough edges, so none of the faces would be considered like pretty or good looking. Like even Yuan, he's supposed to be like this effeminate pretty boy is his characteristic, but even his visuals are often drawn just so roughly that it's hard to consider him as cute. And so yeah, you can tell this is a very male-oriented webtoon because like the drawing of the characters overall is pretty like grotesque in my opinion. So if you're a teenage boy, you'll think it's really cool, but you might be kind of grossed out reading this if you're like a girl because it's all like physical compact and there's like a lot of close-ups of like cuts and bruises and runny noses and red eyes and blood oozing and like spit spraying everywhere, and it's kind of like, ew. It's a little much. And then in terms of like how the characters are drawn, distinguished between each other, I think a lot more could have been done. If they were able to give the characters more detailed features rather than just relying on like hair color changes and like sometimes height changes or skin color changes, it would be easier to distinguish them maybe. Like for example, in other webtoons, you've seen like Freejaw or Inseng Chongmang, even though like most characters have very standard Korean features, you're not just relying on the suspension of disbelief that Korean people can come in all different hair colors naturally. Like you can have a Korean person born with green hair and a Korean person born with purple hair. That's not necessarily true of Korean people or really any humans that I know of. That means doing things where like no two people have identical hairstyles and lengths, body shapes, facial sharpness, roundness, etc. Like focusing on those details is enough to make it so that even if you have like a plethora of characters, they could all be distinguished. But one thing I will give the artwork for this webtoon credit for is that the fights are displayed at great angles. They show the close-up of the fight, they get the sound effect, and then they also zoom out to show who was hit with what. And so you're able to follow along with the fights and the action very well. And this is especially essential when the main character's whole angle is that he is like a dirty fighter who uses whatever is available. This webtoon is really good at highlighting how Yuan resources the props that he uses to fight with and how he uses them, while simultaneously capturing the swiftness of the action. Like there's like one panel that's Yuan grabbing the book, and the next panel is like swoosh, and then the next panel is a close-up of the person's face being like smashed in, and the next panel is a zoomed out version of Yuan recoiling after just hitting him. There's a lot going on in a split second, but it doesn't take too many panels to convey it all clearly. And so artwork-wise, the staging of the fighting is fantastic in this webtoon. And so I think my overall rating for this webtoon is going to be like a 3.75. I don't want this to sound like a really low rating because I actually really loved this webtoon as I was reading it. Like even while it's still being published weekly and it wasn't over yet, I would reread this webtoon many times. Honestly, if we could just cut out the last like 50 chapters, I would probably say that this is like a 4.5 out of 5. And so if you were asking me like, should I read this webtoon? I would say absolutely 100% yes for the first 90% of the webtoon. For the last 10%, you can honestly just like disregard it, in my opinion. And we are so lucky we're getting this drama interpretation being released now. Already from what we've seen in season 1, I have high hopes for how this webtoon is being adapted. I've seen comments where people are saying that this is one of the rare circumstances where the webtoon adaptation into drama is just as good, if not even better, than the original source material itself. And I honestly kind of agree with it. So I'm excited to see season 2. And I would definitely recommend others to go check it out and check out the webtoon before the season is released if you haven't read it already. And because I see there's already so many great creative liberties that the drama is taking with the webtoon, I can only hope that for even the final battle that I thought didn't go so well in the webtoon, in the drama adaptation of it, the director will see the general negative response of the fans, and that will hopefully prompt the scriptwriters to take some creative liberties, alter the final battle, and hopefully change the drama ending into a more satisfying one. And so with that ends my review of 약한영웅, Weak Hero. I hope you liked this review. If you did, please give it a big thumbs up. And if you want to hear more English language reviews from someone who reads Korean webtoons and their source material, please subscribe. That's all, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye!